a national hero or public enemy number one? Historical figures are often controversial, but few were argued with or hated as fiercely as Andrew Jackson, the 7th President of the United States. President Jackson has a complicated legacy. On the one hand, he was the man of the people and a venerated war hero who embodied the spirit of a young America. On the other hand, he was a slaving, genocidal maniac who drove the economy into the ground like a meteor shower. Welcome to Peak Visibility, where today we're talking about the old hickory president himself, Andrew Jackson.
There was a great revival of Jackson in the 1920s and the 1930s. He had been very popular throughout the 19th century, but then had somewhat fallen out of favor after the American Civil War.
Before the scandals, before the forced removals, before the Trail of Tears, there was a boy with a fierce temper and a hunger for revenge. And that temper didn't just simmer, it exploded. You see, during 1767, when Jackson was barely 10 years old, the American Revolution broke out. The war claimed the lives of his 2 brothers and his mother, leaving Jackson orphaned, lone, and with a bitter hatred for all things British. And that revenge wasn't just political, it was personal. Jackson's fierce temper and relentless pride would lead him into over 100 duels, deadly battles fought to defend his honor and reputation. These duels shaped the man who would become one of America's most controversial presidents.
You know, like they used to have duels. So if a duel was like 2 guys would agree, like, you annoy me so much, I'm going to get a gun and we're going to back to back, we're going to walk 10 feet and shoot at each other. Fuck you. Like, you're ready to die. Maybe you'll shoot me, but I'm going to fucking at least be able to shoot you like a man, and we're going to go and do this.
One of his most famous duels came in 1806 with a man named Charles Dickinson. It all started with a disagreement about a horse race, but soon it became a serious personal fight. Dickinson publicly insulted Jackson and, far worse in Jackson's eyes, attacked the reputation of his wife, Rachel, calling her a bigamist. In Jackson's world, family and honor were super important. So Jackson challenged Dickinson to a duel, a kind of fight where 2 people use pistols to settle a serious argument. Jackson even let Dickinson shoot first. When Dickinson fired, he hit Jackson right in the chest. But not surprisingly, Jackson survived and carried the bullet in his body for the rest of his life. When it was Jackson's turn, though, he didn't miss. He shot Dickinson directly in the head, ending his life and defending his family's honor.
Thing of the duel, the doctor remarked to Jackson, "I don't see how you stayed on your feet after that wound." To which Jackson responded, "I would have stood up long enough to kill him if he had put a bullet in my brain."
This duel wasn't the only one. Jackson fought in more than 100 duels during his life. Some were official fights like the one with Dickinson. Others were angry arguments almost ready to explode. Jackson was not just quick to fight. He cared a lot about honor, loyalty, and protecting his reputation. If someone insulted him or his family, it wasn't just a small problem, it was a big deal. In the early 1800s, dueling was technically illegal in many places, but it was still common among Southern gentlemen as a twisted form of conflict resolution. It was seen as a way to prove courage and character. And in this arena, Jackson was unmatched. He didn't duel just to show off, he fought to win. His quick temper and fearlessness made people both respect and fear him. These fights helped build Jackson's image as a tough man who didn't let anyone push him around. That same relentless, combative energy followed Jackson straight into the White House. The duels may have ended, but the battles never stopped. He just traded pistols for politics. Once Jackson took power, the White House became less like a seat of government and more like a personal war room. He immediately began what became known as the spoils system, firing hundreds of federal employees and replacing them with his friends, supporters, and loyalists, regardless of whether they were qualified. His motto was simple: to the victor belong the spoils. In Jackson's case, it meant that once he won the presidency, he believed he had the right to reward his supporters with government jobs, contracts, and influence, no matter their qualifications. It was a way of saying, I won. Now I get to run things how I want and give power to the people who helped me get here.
We had a rough campaign. It was nasty. It was one of the nastiest, they say. They say Andrew Jackson was always the nastiest campaign. They actually said we topped it.
That set the stage for one of the most chaotic administrations in U.S. history. Jackson ignored tradition, bypassed Congress when it suited him, and surrounded himself with unofficial advisors, what critics called the kitchen cabinet. They thought Jackson was breaking the rules and being unfair. But Jackson didn't care about the old ways, he cared about loyalty. Because that same obsession with loyalty exploded into full view during one of the strangest scandals in U.S. history, the Petticoat Affair. It all started when Washington society turned against Peggy Eaton, the wife of Jackson's Secretary of War. Rumors swirled that she had been involved with her husband before her first one died. Most of the cabinet members' wives refused to associate with her. Jackson, seeing echoes of how his own wife Rachel had been slandered during his campaign, went to war. He spent months demanding that his cabinet members and their wives accept Peggy socially, and when they didn't, he fired nearly all of them. A national administration nearly crumbled because of a dinner party snub. In Jackson's White House, personal fights became part of how the country was run. His supporters thought he was strong and bold, but his enemies said he was acting like a dictator, fighting against the government itself. But Jackson's war didn't stop at Washington elites. His most devastating fight was aimed at a group that had once stood by him, the Native Americans. When Jackson was hurt and very weak, it was the Native Americans who helped take care of him. They were his friends and helped him when he needed it most. But later, when Jackson became president, he forgot all about their help. Because in 1830, he signed the Indian Removal Act, giving the federal government authority to relocate Native American tribes from their ancestral homelands in Georgia, Alabama, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Florida to what is now Oklahoma. Jackson said this was to help protect the Native Americans so they could be happy in their new homes. But in truth, it was very hard and unfair for them. Many Native Americans lost their homes and suffered a lot. The most infamous removal was that of the Cherokee Nation.
Determined to move Indians out of the way, he pressed Congress to pass the Indian Removal Act in 1830. It ordered what were known as the 5 civilized tribes, the Cherokees, Creeks, Choctaws, the Chickasaws, the Seminoles, to move to reservations in Oklahoma.
They had tried to adapt to American society, developing written language, building schools, even creating a constitution modeled on the U.S. system. Still, many white settlers wanted their land and saw the Cherokee as a problem. The Cherokee tried to fight this by going to the Supreme Court, the highest court in the country. The court said the Cherokee could stay on their land, but Jackson ignored the decision and didn't stop the government from forcing the Cherokee to move. And in the winter of 1838, thousands of Cherokee men, women, and children were forced to walk over 1,000 miles to Oklahoma. Over 4,000 died from cold, starvation, and disease. This became known as the Trail of Tears, a tragedy not born of misunderstanding, but of deliberate policy. Jackson's betrayal wasn't an accident, it was calculated. A man who once had Native American friends became the cause of great suffering for them. It's one of the most chilling stories in American history and a permanent stain on Jackson's legacy. So, was Andrew Jackson a national hero or public enemy number one? The truth is, he was both, and maybe even more complicated than that. A man shaped by loss, anger, and a fierce code of honor, Jackson fought battles with pistols, politics, and policies that forever changed America. He rose as a champion of the common man but left behind a trail of broken promises, ruined lives, and shattered nations. His story forces us to ask tough questions. How do we remember leaders who did great and terrible things? Can someone be both a war hero and a slaver, a defender of democracy and a destroyer of native peoples? Andrew Jackson's legacy isn't a simple one. It's a warning that power, when mixed with pride and vengeance, can both build and break a nation.